Living longer, living healthier, living better than ever before. Welcome to Mountain Pacific's Healthy Living for Life, a weekly series that gives you the information, education, and expert insight you need to become an active participant in today's ever-changing healthcare climate. Here now is today's program host.
As we age, our social circles tend to get smaller and smaller and often go away altogether. Whether it's due to retirement, the death of loved ones, or personal health issues, more than 40% of older adults who live alone are socially isolated, putting their physical and mental health at risk. Welcome to Healthy Living for Life, a show dedicated to helping you do just that. I'm your host, Lisa Sather. We'll talk about the risks of social isolation right after these messages. Welcome back. Millions of older Americans are living in or are at risk of isolation. And now studies are showing that older adults who are socially isolated are at a greater risk for poor health and even early death. Joining us this morning to talk about the impact of social isolation is Nancy Anderson from AARP. Nancy, thank you for being here.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
Wonderful. So it's interesting to think about loneliness as a public health issue, but isolation is actually getting the attention of federal public health officials. Can you talk to us about why that is?
Yes, I think that it's astounding to know that older adults with limited social contacts have cost Medicare $6.7 billion with a B dollars a year. And it's just amazing to me. Not only is it costly, but those individuals that are isolated, they suffer from more chronic diseases, they suffer from emotional diseases like depression and anxiety. It really has the impact of smoking almost 15 cigarettes a day, which is astounding to me.
Amazing. So does isolation basically mean the person lives alone, or what does it mean when someone is isolated or at risk for isolation?
Well, it doesn't mean just that they live alone. There are often people that live alone because they choose to. They're very satisfied. They still have lots of connections in the community and a circle of friends and activity. Loneliness and isolation are two different things. Okay. Loneliness really is kind of an evaluation of the quality of your relationships, whether you're feeling satisfied with those relationships. But isolation is the quantity. You really don't have any relationships outside of your home, or you can't get out of your home to connect with people. So it's kind of the quantity of your contacts.
That makes sense. So could you possibly give us some examples of then what it means to be isolated or at risk of isolation compared to perceiving isolation or experiencing loneliness?
Sure. You can be geographically isolated or even live alone. That just means you don't have neighbors that are close, but you can still be in contact with people. But if you're socially isolated, you really don't have anyone that you're having a relationship with that you're able to speak with on a regular basis. You might not see anyone. Maybe you don't drive, so you can't get out of the house. The winter weather, this winter has been awful, so absolutely. I'm sure that's really affected a lot of older adults, their ability to get out and about and to connect in the community.
So folks watching at home may especially relate to feeling geographically isolated. Can you talk about your location, a person's location, and how that can contribute to social isolation, especially Montana?
Right. You know, Montana's so rural, and there just aren't the support systems in some of those rural areas that you might find in a city like Billings or Helena. Although I'm happy to report that there are senior centers in communities large and small across the state and in Wyoming as well. It's really important, I think, to look at that as a resource because senior centers are just a wealth of available opportunities. They have congregate meals, so you can sit with friends during lunch. They have games, they have card day, they go on outings. So that's really a great spot in a rural community or even in a city to connect with others and to get involved.
Great. Can you talk about some of the more common reasons as to why isolation is more prevalent among older adults? You touched a little bit on it earlier, but in more specifics.
Right. Well, we're living longer these days, and often when we live longer, we're living with some chronic ailments. Maybe we're not as mobile as we used to be, so that's a big issue. Also, you work for years and you retire, and you've lost that family of work colleagues that you saw every day. Not only that, but you have less money, so maybe you don't do some of the social things that you used to do. There's divorce. Divorce is much more prevalent these days than it used to be. And illness, loss of a spouse. There's just many reasons as we age. Oftentimes some of our friends move away to be closer to their kids. Our kids grow, they're adults, they move away. So, there's a lot of factors that feed into that.
So experts are saying that isolation among older adults is expected to grow as a national problem. Why is that?
Right, well, we're living longer. We're living longer, but there are lots of health issues that follow us into that longer life. And when your mobility goes, if your health starts to go, then it's very easy to become isolated. For example, I'm a younger person, I'm still working full time, but I had a hip replacement 2 years ago. I was married, I still worked every day, but boy, my social activities, my world got very small because I didn't want to go to a restaurant if the parking lot was long, or if there was a big lobby inside, or if I would have to stand and wait. My husband did all the grocery shopping. I mean, I can really relate to what an older person would go through when they don't have the outlet that I had. So it can be a very lonely situation.
Thank you for that personal example. That speaks volumes. So we're going to dig into this deeper during the show and on next week's show too, but can you provide any general tips for how people can avoid isolation?
Well, get involved. Get involved in your community, stay involved in your church, volunteer in the community. And boy, I'm with AARP and we have a super team of volunteers. They get to do fun things in the community. We offer free movies, sports events, concerts, and many of them have come to us as volunteers solo, but they've made friends in that volunteer team and they do things socially now. So they feel like they're giving back, but they're also really engaged in the community and building a new core of friends. So I think it's a really positive way to get involved in the community.
Great, thank you. We're going to take a quick break and we'll come back and visit with you in just a second. Coming up next, we'll have some tips for those folks who do struggle with getting out of the house due to health or other reasons, and we'll find out some options for staying connected to the community. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Physical health and chronic illnesses are significant risk factors for becoming isolated, especially when conditions force older adults to be mostly or completely homebound. Joining me now is Shana Donaldson from Rocky Mountain Development Council to talk about Meals on Wheels, congregate meal programs, and senior centers that provide services for seniors to keep them from feeling secluded or alone. Shana, thanks for being here.
Well, thank you, Lisa.
Yes. So first, can you start out by explaining the Older Americans Act?
Yes, the Older Americans Act was an act passed by Congress in 1965 to address challenges faced by older adults in our country. Through this act, the Meals on Wheels, Congregate Meals Program, and Senior Centers were born. And this act requires these programs to focus on nutrition and socialization in older adults at the community level.
Excellent. So as you know, today we're focusing on the growing issue of social isolation among older adults. And can you speak to what your experience has been through the work you do with these meal programs? Can you attest to isolation being an issue for these folks?
Yes, isolation is a very common issue in older adults. Often as we age, we lose our spouses, our friends, and often our families live further away from us. So that tends to isolate us right there. But then you add that we have declining health and mobility issues that often keep us home and from going out and taking part in activities. And through that, what we often find is that then we're home, we're not able to move around as easily, we're not preparing ourselves good, nutritious meals, then our nutrition declines, our health declines, and then very often we end up with hospitalization and often institutionalization after that. Here in Montana, 30% of older adults live alone. And with that 30% living alone, that puts us at the 6th highest population, or 6th highest for isolation in our country.
Wow. So meals programs in senior centers take direct aim at preventing isolation. I'd like to hear about the Congregate Meals Program firstly. That'd be great.
All right. So the Congregate Meals Program is a program that is often in senior centers, but a location where older adults can come in, have a meal in a congregate setting with others, where they can socialize and eat together. And often by being in these senior centers as well, there are other activities. And with that, it is proven that we eat better when we eat with other people. That helps keep our nutrition up, keeps our health up, and hopefully keeps us from being isolated.
People who live alone or are isolated tend to fall into unhealthy habits and behaviors, especially when it comes to food. So a nationwide program that's also here in Montana is the Meals on Wheels program.
Yes.
Can you talk about that program?
Yes. Well, many people are familiar with the Meals on Wheels program as it is across the country. Mm-hmm. But in each location it's different because it's operated at a community level. So the Meals on Wheels program is for seniors who are homebound or having difficulty getting their own meals. And so this program is not only a hot, nutritious, delicious meal delivered usually 5 days a week, but it's also a friendly visitor to come check in on that person, greet them. They get some interaction with a human face and get to know people, that delivery person better, but it also is a check-in, and that is a comfort to many families as well, because many families are living further away and can't check on their family members each and every day, or see for themselves that they may be losing weight or having health issues that might need to be attended to.
Great. Can you talk about senior centers and what they do?
All right. So senior centers are located not only in larger cities, but also in rural communities as well here in Montana. And these are a great place for seniors to come to socialize, keep their minds active, meet other people, make friends. They offer different activities such as exercise classes. They do informational sessions and learning opportunities, as well as things like crafts and card games. So these are held throughout the state and are open to any seniors 50 and older that would like to come in and visit. Some of these often have transportation to them, or maybe even the city buses can bring people in, or often, there are others, you'll find seniors that carpool together, whereas one might not be able to drive, another senior might bring them. So it's a great opportunity to get out and, keep active and keep from being isolated.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful. Can you talk a little bit more about the social and recreational opportunities offered at the senior centers?
Yes. So at the senior centers, again, I said a lot of times they offer exercise. These exercise classes could be arthritis exercise classes where it's done sitting in a chair or standing behind a chair at your own pace. Line dancing, tai chi, Wii bowling are some of the physical activities that go on, as well as you can find card games such as pinochle, whist, bridge, cribbage, and as well as a favorite of everyone's is bingo. We also offer art and craft groups such as woodworking or quilting, as well as classes and trips, day trips for seniors to go on, and some places do offer overnight trips. You can also find information on subjects pertaining to older adults, so that's just a wealth of information and opportunities there.
Great, thank you. We're going to take a quick break. Thanks for joining us.
Great.
Coming up next, we'll talk about another program that makes sure people are not alone when they need companionship most. Don't go away. We'll be right back after these short messages. Will you stay with me? That's how a program to make sure no one dies alone started in Oregon and has since spread across the country. Now joining us is Laura Brown to talk about this program built on compassion and volunteerism. Thank you for being here, Laura.
Well, thank you for having me.
Well, thank you. So the program we're talking about is No One Dies Alone, NODA. Can you give us some background on the program, please?
A nurse in Oregon was going around and passing her medications to her patients, and one of her patients asked her if she could stay and sit with him. She told him that she had some patients to deliver meds to, and when she came back, he had passed away. She felt terrible, and she felt that no one should be alone when they die. So she started the program of volunteers to sit with people that are close to the end of life.
That's incredible. Can you talk to us about how NODA works? What's the process?
We get a referral from the nurses, a chaplain, a doctor, a family member, anyone that wants to have someone sit with someone that is at near end of life. And our coordinator is called, and then she calls the volunteers in to sit with the patients. We sit with the patients for 2 hours at a time, and sometimes we do it 1 time a day, sometimes we do it 3 times a day, depending what the need is. And we sit usually during the times that the nurses are busy, their med passing or their change of shift. We try to cover when they can't be with the patient. We try to be there.
And this is at St. Pete's Hospital here in Helena, correct?
Yes, it is. It's at St. Pete's Healthcare, and they started in 2012.
What kind of training do the NODA volunteers receive then to be able to do this work?
We all come together and have a training, usually an evening training, excuse me, and we are instructed in how to sit with the patient, the confidentiality. Mm-hmm. The HIPAA laws are very stringent, and with us as well. Mm-hmm. And once we get finished with the training, we go up and have a practice run on how to sit with the patient and how to react to the patient.
So can you give us some examples of what volunteers are actually doing when they're sitting with the patients? I know there's different things that a patient might need or want.
A lot of patients are in a coma when we get there. Mm-hmm. Some are alert. Depending on what we find when we get there, or have talked to the family of the patient or the nurses, then we decide what we do. But usually we just sit and have a quiet presence with the patients. Sometimes we play music. We usually play a quiet harp music, unless the patient likes country western. Mm-hmm. and other things. And if they do, we try to accommodate that. But usually we just sit quietly and we talk to the patients. We might hold their hand. We assess the patient. If we think they're in pain, we go and contact the nurse, and the nurse will come in and take care of whatever is needed. We are there as a presence. It is their journey, it is not our journey. So we allow the patient to direct what we do.
So do you recruit volunteers, or how do people come to be a part of this program?
We don't recruit because word of mouth gets a lot of people involved. And we have a waiting list all the time, and we train once a year, so we keep the waiting list at that time. If someone wants to have a chance to do this program, they can call St. Peter's Health at 437-2723 and be put on a waiting list, and then the next training session they would be called.
Wonderful. So why are there times when a person would find him or herself alone at their time of their death, without someone by their side?
A lot of times people have family that are far away. Mm-hmm. Maybe they don't have any family living or friends living. They're elderly, and that happens a lot. Sometimes the patients have family that are estranged, so they don't have someone that can sit with them. A lot of times we have families that can be there, but they need a break. Mm-hmm. It's a long process sometimes. Dying takes hours sometimes days, and it gets real long for the families. So we try to be there when the family needs us to be there. If the family's not involved, we try to be there when the nursing staff needs us, when they're at their busiest times. And they are so grateful, and the families are too.
Absolutely, I can only imagine. So it's interesting, these volunteers are actually strangers to the patients that they are sitting with and giving companionship to. Do patients at all struggle with the fact that they might not necessarily obviously know this person?
We have never found that. When you go in and visit with the patient, you greet them, you tell them who you are, even if they're in a coma, you speak to them and tell them that you're there as a presence. And they relax, they enjoy it, they're thankful someone's with them.
How do you know the program's a success, the feedback you're getting from those folks you work with?
The families have sent letters, the nursing staff thanks us every time we come. Even if the patient hasn't died, they are so grateful to have someone in there with their patient so that they're not having to worry about them as they're doing their daily job.
And then maybe a few sentences, tell us if someone wanted to start a No One Dies Alone program in their community, what could that person do?
They can contact Sacred Heart Medical in Oregon, and they will set up a training session.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks to all my guests this morning. This week we focused on preventing isolation and loneliness through programs where the volunteers come to you. Next week we'll talk about how you can get out and reconnect with your community, or how you can help keep others from feeling alone. We hope you'll come back to continue this conversation with us. Until then, stay fit, stay well, and stay healthy for life with Healthy Living for Life.
Healthy Living for Life is brought to you by Mountain Pacific Quality Health. We'd love to hear from you. If you have suggestions for future programs, visit our website at mpqhf.org or call us at 406-443-4020. You can also catch us on YouTube by visiting our website and clicking on the YouTube icon. Special thanks to Fire Tower Coffee House and Roasters. Production facilities provided by Video Express Productions.